Holton here. How's it going? I am in a closet in the lounge in the Panama airport on my way to Ukraine to do some reporting on the situation on the ground there. There's a lot going on in Ukraine right now, and you're definitely going to want to keep up with my travels. I've got my Starlink, and I'm going to be reporting from all sorts of interesting places out there on the front lines in Ukraine for the next 10 days or so. But there are some breaking news out of Israel that we need to talk about, and that is that the supposed ceasefire, which you all know I've been telling you all this time is not a ceasefire because it only involved the United States and the Lebanese army, and Israel did not involve one of the major or the major combatant, and that is Hezbollah. So Hezbollah yesterday fired an anti-tank rocket at Israeli forces, and Israeli forces fired back. They also fired mortar rounds at the Israelis over the border into Israel, up in the north, and Israel fired back. Israel also saw that there are lots of reports from Lebanese media that that Hezbollah is uh, moving back into the southern part of Lebanon. And, this is the part where, under the agreement, they were supposed to stay out of. So Israel has been now and then shooting at those guys. There have been probably at least a half a dozen um, exchanges of gunfire or airstrikes or something like that, artillery, over the last few days, and even just over the last 24 hours. And so, obviously, this quote unquote ceasefire is not a ceasefire because Hezbollah is not agreeing to play by the rules. So, they are trying to lick their wounds and consolidate their forces and sort of reorganize in southern Lebanon. Israel is still in southern Lebanon. They haven't pulled out of there yet, so they're putting a stop to it wherever they see it. They even struck in the Bekaa Valley, which is much further in the north, up near Beirut, just south of Beirut, yesterday, and they this get this now. They saw some Hezbollah forces in an area in the south that were moving into a church, like a Maronite Christian church, and so they shot at those guys and took out those Hezbollah operatives. Then they went into the church and found a tunnel inside the church, and this obviously means that the Maronites probably weren't using the church anymore. There are quite a few villages up there that in southern Lebanon that are basically ghost towns. They're not actually places where a lot of people live. They were places where people lived, and Hezbollah has sort of gone in and taken over the entire village. And that's why you see the Israelis destroying entire villages up there, because they move into these villages and find out it's actually a military base. It's a forward operating base for Hezbollah. And they are, have to wire the whole thing up with explosives, and you see the whole top mountain get blown off. Well, that's what they found yesterday when they got into a firefight with some Hezbollah operatives that were near this church. They took out finally took those guys out. They went into the church and they found a tunnel shaft in the church that had weapons and ammunition and explosives and all sorts of things in the tunnel. So they also, now get this, okay, the Israelis saw a bulldozer that was uh, doing some things that were suspicious, let's say. I don't know exactly what the bulldozer was doing, but whatever it was doing was enough to arouse the suspicions of the Israelis, and so they dropped a drone. They had made an airstrike on the bulldozer. Turned out the bulldozer belonged to the Lebanese army, and the Lebanese army said that their bulldozer operator was wounded by the strike. not killed. um, the Israeli army says they're looking into the matter, but they haven't said one way or the other what it is. But this can tell you, again, what I want to do is help you kind of read between the lines a little bit. And if you read between the lines here, what it says is that this Lebanese army bulldozer was doing something that likely would have helped Hezbollah uh, in some way, whether it helped them by opening up a road that the Israelis had closed or something along those lines. I don't know. The news item didn't say, but it's obvious that, as we said, the Lebanese army is assisting Hezbollah and not doing what they're supposed to be doing in southern Lebanon, which is making sure Hezbollah doesn't come back. So if Israel is having to strike a Lebanese army bulldozer, that's not a good sign for this quote unquote ceasefire. And so, like I said, I've been saying it over and over and over again. The media has not been reporting it this way, but this was not a ceasefire. This was a political stunt. This is security theater for the Biden administration, because if you look at all the speeches that Joe Biden has made since this happened, he has been claiming that he's brought peace to the Middle East, that he has worked out got the fighting to stop in Lebanon. Well, no, he hasn't. This is not a ceasefire. It never was a ceasefire, and Hezbollah is proving that every day. They also the Israelis have had to strike at several of the border crossings because there are activities going on at these border crossings that they struck before the ceasefire started, or the truce started. They struck all the border crossings before the truce started, and what kind of took out all the crossings. That's pretty easy to fix, right? I mean, you've ever been to a minor border crossing someplace? It's usually just a little booth and a little gate, and that's not a lot to it. So they, probably put some potholes in the roads or whatever, but those are being actively worked on to open them back up so that Hezbollah can bring in more weapons from Iran. And it's getting more and more interesting in that region. So Israel struck some of those border crossings again. Uh, again, Israel didn't actually agree to much in the way of a quote unquote ceasefire. They basically agreed to stop shooting at Hezbollah if Hezbollah would stop shooting at them, but they retained the right to shoot at things that posed a risk to Israel, which is really all they were doing to begin with. I mean, it hasn't really changed, right? So again, on paper, everybody's like, "Oh, Joe Biden, he negotiated a ceasefire." No, he didn't. There's no ceasefire. And so again, if you're just joining us, we got. Yeah, sorry, we froze up there for a second. Are we? Yeah, I think we're back. Okay, I know it's early in the morning for many of you, but I had to go live now because I've got to go catch a plane in about 20 minutes. And so I just wanted to very quickly get to this before I got on the plane, because obviously this is breaking news. There is fighting going on between the IDF and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. There's been at least a half a dozen instances where there has been exchanges of fire, whether that's gunfire or rockets or artillery or airstrikes in the past 24 hours. This is all coming from reports out by the Institute for the Study of War, which is a very good resource if you really want to drill down and get deep into what's happening on the front lines, both in Ukraine and in Israel. So the Israelis are still in Lebanon. They're still advancing in certain places in Lebanon, and they have blocked off other roads. That's another thing that happened over the last 24 hours. The Israelis are blocking off certain roads to keep people from coming back into the south via those roads, especially Hezbollah. And so what are we seeing? The UNIFIL forces are going in and opening up the roads that the Israelis have closed. Well, that's not what they agreed to do under this quote unquote agreement. what UNIFIL agreed to do was to help Israel make sure that Hezbollah didn't come back in. But they are actually opening the roads back up to allow Hezbollah to come back in. And that is obviously not what the deal was, right? So just to reiterate, there was some Hezbollah fighters fired an anti-tank rocket at Israeli forces earlier today, this morning. There has been a mortar attack into Israel from Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. There has been a gunfight near a Maronite church in southern Lebanon, which then resulted in them finding another tunnel network, which they are going to destroy. Because again, part of the whole deal is that they can continue to strike at things that are a threat to them. Any military infrastructure in southern Lebanon is a threat to Israel, and they're going to wreck it. Okay, they're going to blow it up. And there have been attempts by Hezbollah to come back into, well, not attempts, they're actually doing it. Hezbollah is filtering back into southern Lebanon, south of the Litani River, in blatant disregard of the agreement because they didn't agree to the agreement. And there are Hezbollah operatives that are trying to bring weapons in from Iran. Now, it's going to be pretty difficult for Israel to stop all of the smuggling that goes on between Syria and Lebanon because it's a long border. It's wide open in many places. There's not much of like in the way of a border fence. It's not like there's a Trump wall there or anything. So if they can't get across on the established border crossings, you can bet that there are many roads that will cross the border as smuggling routes between Syria and Lebanon. And so Israel's got a big job on its hands to try to keep them from bringing weapons into Lebanon and rearming and refitting Hezbollah. But this is not going to stop. Hezbollah is going to keep trying to do it. Now, let's move over to Syria for just a second, just as it relates to Lebanon and Israel. The fighting that's been going on in Syria between the rebel groups. So let's just say two teams for now. Okay. There's Team Assad. There's the team that's from the regime, the president, Bashar al Assad, who's trying to maintain control over what little he controls of Syria right now. And then you have Team Anti-Assad, which is made up of lots of people that don't necessarily like each other and will definitely be fighting each other once they're done fighting Assad. But that would be made up of the Free Syrian Army, backed by Turkey, the Syrian Democratic Forces, backed by the United States, etc. On Team Assad, you have the Iranian Hashishabi militias. They're called Popular Mobilization Units coming out of Iraq, and these are they some of them call themselves Katib Hezbollah. Okay, so they're essentially Hezbollah operatives that are from Iraq, right? And HTS is another one. There's now. Sorry, HTS is one of the rebel groups. There's about 200 rebel groups in in Syria that are fighting against the government, trying to take over. And this is, for the most part, those rebel groups are more extremist Muslim than Bashar al-Assad. That would be very bad for Israel. So you don't be surprised if you see Israel striking at some of these rebel groups as well as striking at Assad's forces. I mean, Israel is going to strike at pretty much everybody except for the Kurds in Syria. And as I mentioned on yesterday's live, the United States military is assisting the Syrian Democratic Forces. This is the Kurds in Syria. We do have troops on the ground in Syria, about 900 U.S. Army Rangers, and we have Air Force assets coming from Erbil Air Base in northern Iraq that are striking at these Iranian-backed militias coming into Syria from Iraq, from the south. And so there's a lot of fighting going on there. But one player is notoriously missing, and that is Hezbollah themselves out of Lebanon. Now, typically, they would have gone and sent fighters into Syria to assist the Syrian forces and help them fight back against these rebels, but they are not doing that. And that's most likely because they've been absolutely decimated, and they can't. They're trying to reconstitute their forces in Lebanon, and they don't have anything to spare for the Syrian conflict. Now, they did actually own some armored vehicles and trucks and even a few tanks that they were keeping in Syria so they didn't get destroyed in Lebanon. And so those may actually have been, we don't know the disposition of those. They may have been captured by the rebel forces. They may be being used by the Syrian army. We don't know. So it doesn't look good for Hezbollah over there. That's a very good indicator that has of how badly Hezbollah has been hurt in this conflict in Lebanon. But they are not out, they're not finished. They are trying to reconstitute their forces. They are trying to infiltrate back into the south, and they are getting help in doing that from the Lebanese army and from UNIFIL. And there have been multiple instances of both of those entities assisting Hezbollah in certain ways. Like I said, by opening roads for them, by doing construction work for them, whatever. And this is not a surprise to anybody who knows anything about this area. And so the non-ceasefire is holding about as well as we expected it to, but Israel is not uh, limiting itself in any way when it comes to protecting their troops and their people from uh, the from Hezbollah reconstituting or bringing fighters back in to the region. Okay, now down in the south, there's been quite a bit of fighting still in Gaza. I saw, I think I posted this on my chuckholton.com page yesterday. If you go to chuckholton.com, you can see a lot of videos that I can't show you on YouTube that I'm putting up over there. And just go become a free subscriber at my page there at chuckholton.com. And the video that I put up was of a Hamas fighter inside a bombed out building, setting up a missile and getting ready to launch it. They have a drone that's like hovering out there, zoomed in on this guy, and he doesn't know it's there. And he's in there working on this missile and trying to, aim this rocket on a pile of rubble in order to fire it into Israel. And then the next shot you see is an airstrike taking out that building in pretty spectacular fashion. So that guy got a ticket on the express train to Hades, and more power to Israel in taking those guys out and safeguarding their people in the south. So we have not seen any measurable attacks coming out of Gaza into Israel as far as rockets and stuff in the last few weeks. Anything that's if you watch that video and you see how he's setting up a rocket on a pile of rubble, you can't aim the stuff correctly that way, and he'd be lucky if it even made it into Israel that way. It just propping it up like that. It's quite a bit more detailed than that to actually get a missile to go where you want it to go. So pointing it at just pointing it north and letting it fly doesn't even guarantee it's going to make it into Israel proper. So there are still places in Gaza that Hamas controls. They believe in Beit Hanun and in the central part of the Gaza City and stuff. There are still places that are controlled by Hamas. So Israel's not done there, but they are making progress, and that's good. Now, down in the south, in Yemen, there was a large attack by the Houthis on two American warships and three American flagged vessels yesterday with anti ship missiles and drones that were fired. And I think it was the USS Abraham Lincoln, which shot them all down and managed to defend against them. But it is just the real frustrating thing about that is that the combat power that we have deployed into the Bab el Mandab Straits and the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean are sufficient to reduce Yemen or pretty much any other country on planet Earth to a smoking ruin. And the Navy has not been given the authority, they've not been facilitated to actually strike at Yemen in a meaningful enough way to deter the Houthis. So the Houthis just keep lobbing these Iranian missiles and drones and even remote controlled boats filled with explosives at shipping in that region. And about half the time they are actually managed to strike their targets. They've damaged a lot of stuff, and so none of the ships basically going through that area are able to get insurance in order to for their transit, and that just means that most of them are not coming. They're not coming through, and so hopefully under Donald Trump he will take the gloves off with the Houthis and actually strike the Houthis in a meaningful enough way that they will stop this ridiculousness, stop all their shenanigans down there in the South. Uh, and he doesn't even have to use the U.S. military to do it. Eric Prince had a really good idea about sending contractors in there to work with the Yemeni government that was kind of ousted by the Houthis to kick the Houthis out and overtake Sana'a and their the areas that the Houthis control, and that wouldn't actually cost very much, and it would give Yemen back to the rightful government. Although we're not real friendly with those guys either, but using contractors would be a good go-between, and then that would enable trade and shipping to open back up. I'm listening to a book right now I want to just recommend to you, and that is a book called The End of the World is Just the Beginning by Peter Zeihan. It is pretty shocking, pretty chilling book because Peter Zeihan is a geopolitical strategist and economist who is looking at the future of the United States and the rest of the world. And while the U.S. is over the next decade, while the U.S. is in better shape than many countries will be, it is a pretty dire outlook on what will likely happen, and most of it has to do with demographics. A lot of it has to do with just the way that the United States is pulling back from its place as a global guarantor of easy and secure shipping around the world, and is no longer willing, at least, maybe not even able, to actually, keep the high seas open and free for trade. And as that goes away, everything that we have come to take for granted as normal in terms of a just-in-time delivery system and that sort of thing will go away in the next several years, and we're talking about possibly before the end of the Trump administration. This stuff will start to go away, and as it goes away, you will see a cascading waterfall of destruction around the world as these systems just fall apart. And so what that means is you need to be preparing yourself for this new reality. And I highly recommend you go get that book, but I also recommend you go get my new book, Death of Civilization, which is along the same lines and has more practical lists and ideas of what you can do about it to actually help you be prepared. And it's nothing. Look, we don't need to run around in fear. We just need to look out ahead and extrapolate what we're seeing and make decisions based on what we believe the future will be like. And so um, by doing so, we will be prepared to not only survive what's coming, but actually thrive, do better than most people will be doing because we have taken steps to do it. And it's not super costly. It's not things like you've got to go get 5 years of food and put it in your basement or anything like that. It's more like you've got to start making connections with your neighbors and start bringing your outlook down to a more local outlook rather than a global outlook. Right now, you can order something on Amazon and it's in China, and in a week or two, it'll be on your front doorstep. And that people do that all the time. They're just used to being able to just order anything they want. We need to start thinking a lot more locally, and this is going to bring the United States back to a more local centered outlook. And the other thing we need to start doing is having more babies. So get busy, folks. You need to start having some babies and helping out the demographic decline of America. Now, I'm just watching the timer because I got to go get on my airplane. I saw that there were a couple of questions. So if I can get my glasses out here, I will see if I can answer your questions real quick. I do love the babies. Yes, I do. And I've got 5 grandbabies. And yeah, if you become a supporter at chuckholton.com, you can get my book for free. And you just have to download it. It's as a digital download. You're not going to get a dead tree version. If you want a dead tree version, you're going to have to go to Amazon to get that. I am pretty sure we already sold all 100 signed copies that I was giving out, and I'll be able to sell some more signed copies in mid-December, but they won't get to you in time for Christmas. Question: why did they not negotiate with Hezbollah rather than Lebanese government to begin with? Because Hezbollah wouldn't come to the table, and they couldn't find anybody who would answer their pager. That's why. Peter Zeihan, Zeihan. Yeah, I listen. I'm trying to hit 100 books this year. Okay. End of the world is just the beginning. That's the name of the book. Trump's tweets from yesterday would make Hamas release the hostages. Well, let's hope so. I saw those tweets. Trump said that he would that if the hostages were not released by the time he takes office, there would be hell to pay, quote unquote. And let's hope that he's serious about that. Let's hope that we see something, very major taking place in Gaza. American troops going into Gaza. I would not be averse to that. Working with the Israeli government to put a lot more focus on Gaza and finish the fight there, get it over with for everybody. And the likelihood of getting those, just remember, likelihood of getting those hostages back is slim to none. I mean, it's very slim. Question: what is the travel route to Ukraine? Well, I'm starting from Panama here in about 10 minutes. And then I am going to Newark in New Jersey. Then I'm going to Munich in Germany. And then I'm going to Warsaw in Poland. And then I'm going to get on a train. I'm going to take a taxi from Warsaw to a place called Helm. And I'm getting on an 11-hour train ride. And they didn't have sleeper carriages, which makes me very sad because we're going to be sitting bolt upright for 11 hours. Into Kyiv, and then from Kyiv, we'll get on a train to go out to the front lines and start bringing you some reporting from out there. So there you go. It's a long, long travel day for sure. I have talked to Amir Tsarfati, but I have not interviewed him. He's just never been available whenever I've tried. One of these days, I'll get him on an interview. All right, so I have got to run. Thank you very much for watching. Like I said, please go and subscribe over at chuckholton.com. I'll be posting pictures and videos and stuff as I travel to Ukraine. And I will also be, maybe doing a couple of lives exclusively for supporters over there, like an Ask Me Anything kind of thing. So there's a lot of content that I don't put on YouTube that's over there. And so I highly recommend you go do that. Please go ahead and subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet, and hit that like button. Tell YouTube that other people need to see it. Thank you very much for watching, even so early in the morning. And I'm going to go get on my airplane. So be praying for me. Does Hamas still have the hostages? Yes, they do. Over about 100, but we don't know how many of them are alive. All right. God bless you. Take care.